I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On tonight's episode, we'll cover Will's latest article evaluating quarterback commit Max Brown. A couple of big-time recruits on Billy Napier's radar. We'll talk about those guys, Harold Perkins and Jacoby Mathews, and portal Hoppin for Tyron Hopper. Back and forth there, but into the portal he goes. And we'll talk about portal morals on the dollar. Should players follow coaches in the portal when the coach gets a new job? Interesting discussion from the guys over at 1010XL in Jacksonville this week that we'll touch on for a dollar. But first, Will, how's your week going, man?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Obviously, Billy Napier's been busy. There's always a lot of stuff going on in Gator Nation. And, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. So the bonus episode today over at Patreon, we're going to be talking about NFL versus college overtime. So head over there, support us, Patreon.com.
I wonder what side of the debate you'll be on that one.
I told somebody, I got a buddy who's a Kansas City fan. Then we were texting back and forth, and literally in the second quarter, I just kept texting him, the kick of the balls is coming. The kick in the balls is coming. And then with 13 seconds left, I thought I was safe. And I tweeted something at Katie Turner about, hey, we need to go jump through some tables now. And then 13 seconds later, had to retweet, go, oh, my bad. Like, not so much.
Dude, wearing this hat, I can't say a whole lot. I can't say a whole lot about any playoff success, but I will say this. I mean, it's the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. You do have to expect it at some point, right?
Yeah, time to circle the wagons again, my friend. Come back next year and rumbling, bumbling, stumbling right out of the playoffs. I'm sure again next year as well.
Hey, looks like got a bright future ahead though. Good team up there in Buffalo. Built for years to come, it looks like. 2 bits, Will. Let's start 2 bits. We'll evaluate Max Brown, the article that you put out this past week. You put a tweet out, which I love this tweet. Bud Elliott, objectively one of my favorite voices in college football right now. He over on the Cover 3 podcast with 24/7 Sports. He put out a tweet this weekend without the transfer portal. This was during the Bengals game, by the way. Without the transfer portal, is Joe Burrow in the NFL? How many stud talents over the years before transfers are common, especially at quarterback, went to sell insurance because they didn't get picked up? They didn't get picked to be the starter. And to your point, Will, you dug into that. You took that the next step in your article, and you asked, are there players who are being overlooked right now at the college level who are going to become elite? I think that answer is clearly yes. And you also want to know, are there recruits who are being overlooked for some reason that a smart staff heavy on analytics like the one Billy Napier is building right now in Florida would be able to target and develop? And these questions led you to dig into Florida's most recent commit at quarterback, 6'3", 200-pound Max Brown, a 3-star prospect out of Lincoln Christian in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Will, what did you see about Max Brown, and what has you excited about him?
Well, so first, I actually want to go back to that Bud Elliott quote. I think it's an interesting tweet. I think it's interesting. We were talking about Buffalo to start this, and Josh Allen's sort of the poster boy for somebody who doesn't complete a lot of passes and then is able to improve that. But the thing is that Allen had all the tools and then was able to put it together, but he's really an outlier. And I think that's kind of the thing that you got to think about here is how many stud talents were lost. I mean, we know it's a few because Burrow might not have played. And quite honestly, Kyle Trask might not have played either, right? And now he's a 2nd-round pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if Tom Brady decides to hang it up after this year, may end up being the starter for the Buccaneers next year. We'll see. So clearly there's the ability of, there are people who are underrated at the quarterback position. And you think about guys like Baker Mayfield, and those guys turn out real well. You think about guys like Graham Harrell at Texas Tech. You even think about a guy like Hendon Hooker, who's sort of bounced around between Virginia Tech and Tennessee, but's played really well. And you start looking at those guys, and what you really find is that oftentimes the 2 things you're looking for is you want a guy at the high school level who's not dinking and dunking, right? If it's like 8 yards per attempt at the high school level, that's just way too low. That's sort of where Luke Del Rio was when he was coming into Alabama first and then transferred into Florida. And then the other thing is you want him to read defense as well. And one of the things that really correlates between high school and college is completion percentage. So if you're looking at Max Brown, the thing that really encourages you about him is that he's got a 71.6% completion percentage for his career, his junior and senior year there in high school. He's also 12.4 yards per attempt So he's not dinking and dunking down the field. He's completing a high number of passes. Now, usually that means that a guy is reading defenses really well. And the interesting thing is when you actually turn on the highlight films and start looking at Brown, you don't really see that. What you see is you see him challenging a lot of double coverage. You see him throwing the ball up there for his receiver to get. And this is sort of where the knock comes in on Brown. He's got a good arm. He has good size. He's 6'3", 205 pounds. I mean, he's a decent sized dude. Put another 15 or 20 pounds on him. Prototypical NFL size, maybe a little bit short, but 6'3" is not short. So really the knock is that the level of talent that he's been playing against there at Oklahoma, that he hasn't been forced to learn how to read defenses. And so he's more of a developmental prospect. And I think that's what you see when you look at the film is you see a guy who he's not going to step in and contribute right away, which is what a 5-star guy does. Right. I mean, other than at Georgia, when you've got a guy, who's a 5-star guy, the expectation is that they're going to jump in and contribute right away. We saw that at Florida with Tim Tebow, not necessarily the starters freshman year, but at least contributing in some capacity. Justin Fields, the minute he got to Ohio State, was able to jump in and be a starter. JT Daniels, when he got to USC, was able to jump in and be a starter right away. And so you see that with 5-star guys. 4-star guys usually take about a year to sort of get the, and especially high 4-star guys. Jake Fromm's maybe one of the exceptions, being able to jump in and start his freshman year, but he wasn't that great his freshman year. He just had a great team around him. And then you get to the 3-star guys who typically are going to take a couple of years. And that's really what you're seeing with Max Brown. Is I would be surprised if he saw the field before his junior year. But I would also be surprised if he's not the backup quarterback, if not the starter, by the time he's a junior. By the time Anthony Richardson's gone, by the time Jack Miller's gone, depending upon who comes in the 2023 and 2024 classes is going to determine where Brown is. But it makes a lot of sense to bring in a guy who's a 3-star because you need to fill that spot in 2022. You don't want a gap there where you've got Miller and Richardson and then nobody in terms of, the 2020 classes and then the 2021 class. And then obviously now the 2022, because there weren't any quarterbacks or because they had Carlos Del Rio Wilson and Jalen Kitna, and you assume there's going to be some turnover with some of these guys at the quarterback position. That's sort of the thing, is having him there, having him come in with the 2022 class, filling that spot, and then also not necessarily being a threat to perhaps an elite signal caller in 2023 makes a difference.
So you're a big believer of bringing in quarterbacks every single year nowadays, correct? Because of the transfer portal primarily, where these guys can take off anytime.
Yeah. In fact, I think I'm more of a believer in having one every year than I am in having two any given year. Because if you've got two that you bring in the same class, maybe you redshirt one guy and then you offset him by a class. You could do it that way. But the reality is with the portal, you're probably going to get guys who leave. So this, again, sort of goes to strategy. It was something that I wondered whether Dan Mullen was doing last year with Jalen Kitna when he brought him in, right? Carlos Del Rio Wilson is the 4-star guy, the guy that you're really sort of targeting as your blue chip. But Jalen Kitna is the developmental guy who comes in and isn't going to transfer out. You're going to get 4 years out of him unless, there's an injury, he gets an opportunity to play. Del Rio Wilson wins the job back, and then Kitna, after he's shown something on the field, decides to transfer. So, 3-star guys in the transfer portal, unless they've shown something on the field, they end up getting left in the transfer portal. I mean, we've seen that a lot. And so a guy like Brown, a guy like Kitna, those are guys who are going to struggle, I think, to be able to transfer out of a program, which means you're able to build your depth and you don't necessarily have to worry about re-recruiting the position every single year.
Key phrase there, build your depth. I think that's something that in the transfer portal era, it's particularly important to be able to do so because you can lose players so quickly. However, it's also important. Some of these guys are going to be career backups, and it's, I know it's a new era and we're looking for those big, we're going to talk about them in 4 bits here with Perkins and Mathews and some of the big high profile recruits, but a lot more of these guys are going to be the guys who are the pieces building that depth on the roster. And without depth, I mean, you could get caught in a real tough spot with just an injury or two. And so that's why it's important that you continue to bring in, if you like what you see on tape out of Brown, you bring a guy in like that 3-star prospect. I think that's a good approach from Napier and his staff.
Well, I think you see the same thing with some of the other spots they're filling out, right? I mean, you've got a guy like Hayden Hansen coming in. You look at his profile and you go, is that a reach? But then you look a little bit deeper in his profile, and what you see is the same thing you see with Tony Livingston, the same thing you see with David Connor, the same thing you see with the offensive lineman, Cameron Waits, who comes in, they all have basketball backgrounds. And so I think Napier is taking some flyers on some guys in his transition class. And Waits isn't really necessarily a flyer, but I think he feels like he's found an inefficiency, right? That if you find a guy who's played multiple sports, that chances are they haven't specialized in football. They haven't necessarily been ranked as high as some of the guys who have specialized in football, but that when a guy is explosive and has size and you can start putting those things together, that basketball background's important. Brown doesn't necessarily have the background, but again, I think it's one of those things where if you think you've got some inefficiencies that you can see on film, you go and get the guy. So look, I mean, 70% completion percentage means he's going to be pretty accurate with the football. The question I have is he going to be quick enough when it comes to his reads? There were some hesitations where he had receivers who were coming open and he didn't really have the anticipation that I'd like to see. I don't think that's something that's taught. So I think they're going to be I mean, you can teach a little bit of it, but I don't think, I think in some cases that's kind of natural. And so I think, there's going to be some inconsistency there, but let's be honest, we had a lot of inconsistency at quarterback this year, regardless of who was in there. And so just bodies at that position become important to build up the competition. And there's sort of a log jam. I mean, you got Emory Jones from the 2018 class, nobody from the 19 class. I think most of us suspect Emory Jones is going to sort of wait out the spring and then transfer someplace else when the smoke clears. You've got Anthony Richardson and Jack Miller, both from the 2020 class. Miller just transferred in, but if Richardson wins the job, okay. So you've got, the starter and the backup, and then you got Carlos DeRio Wilson and Jalen Kitna sitting there going, okay, I'm third and fourth on the depth chart right now. So again, you might lose somebody there. So having Brown just, again, like you said, from a depth perspective becomes important.
You can check out Will's article on Max Brown on readingreaction.com. If you're a little tight on time, but you're able to listen to it, we are putting up audio articles now on our YouTube channel. So we'll also put this in audio format on the YouTube channel if you want to check that out. All right, let's slide over to 4 bits. Couple of big time targets still out there. We'll first start with Harold Perkins, decommitted from Texas A&M. 6 foot 2.5, 240 pounds from Cypress Park High School, just outside of Houston. And it's him and Jacoby Mathews are the top 2 still out there for this staff. Will, the safety from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, would be either one of these guys would be a big get this late in the game. If you get both of them, I mean, these are 2 players who are ranked in the top 36 in the country. It'd be unbelievable to get. Which one do you feel is more critical for this staff to land?
So it's interesting. I actually think it's Jacoby Mathews. The reason I think it's Mathews is because he's the guy who's been trending to Florida this entire time. You think about Perkins, he committed to Texas A&M. There's still quite a bit of smoke when it comes to Texas or LSU now that he's decommitted. Certainly that'd be a huge get for Billy Napier. And I think everybody would look at that from a perception standpoint and say that's critical. But Mathews is a guy they've targeted ever since they got there to Florida. He's from Louisiana. He knows Corey Raymond. So all of the things that you sort of put in place when you moved from Louisiana to Florida, out of all of that, Mathews is the guy that you would sit there and say, hey, this is the guy we should get. And so to me, that's the most important part, because he's the guy that I look at and say, I'm penciling him in already. I'm not ready to pencil in Harold Perkins. I think Perkins is somebody who I'm hopeful for. If Napier brings him in, I'm going to be effusive in my praise for bringing him in. At the same time, Mathews is a guy I've pretty much already penciled in. And so if he doesn't come, if Perkins doesn't come, I'll be disappointed. But if Mathews doesn't come, that'll be a pretty big letdown at that point.
I'm going to go with Perkins as the more critical one here, because we're going to talk about it in 6 bits here, losing Tyron Hopper. I mean, this is a guy who can come in and this is number 4 player overall in the country. Will, I think he can contribute right away. A couple notes from Gabe Brooks of 24/7 Sports here. He called him a dynamic 2-way player with big play ability, with the ball in his hands, and an attacking defender. Legitimately could be a high major running back if he were on that side of the ball, as opposed to being a linebacker prospect. I mean, a guy with that kind of athleticism, Will, putting him in our defense, he's more plays on the edge from what I'm seeing here overall with his game. But this type of athlete at the linebacker position, we've not had that type of athlete in a few years. And with the size, the speed, and everything go along with it, the full package at linebacker, this would be a hell of a get for Billy Napier and his staff if you land Harold Perkins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you from the standpoint of, I mean, look, the Gators have only signed 4 5-star guys since 2015, and they had 2 guys in that 2015 cycle, so they'd only signed 2 guys from 2 5-stars from the 2016 class. And when they've signed 11 since 2011, and when you go down the list, they're all people who have contributed to the program, even the recent ones. I mean, you got Jason Marshall, Gravon Dexter, Martez Ivy, CC Jefferson. Those Jefferson's maybe the worst, quote unquote, of the 5-stars. Tease Tabor, Vernon Hargraves, Kelvin Taylor, DJ Humphreys, John Bullard, Dante Fowler, and Jeff Driscoll. All of those guys were starters, right? And I think that's kind of what you're saying with Perkins, is he's going to be a starter. But one of the things I think that we do need to take into account is what Billy Napier and what Patrick Toney want to do on the defensive side of the ball. And one of the things they want to be able to do is they want to be able to cover, and they want to be able to tackle from every position. And they want to be able to bring somebody from every position except for the boundary corner. And they are loading up at safety. I mean, you got Kamari Wilson, Devin Moore, Miguel Mitchell, and if you put Jacoby Mathews in there as well, you all of a sudden have an awful lot of versatility there in the defensive backfield. And if you think about places where Florida has struggled, giving up big plays, having safeties who take the right route to make the tackle, all those counter plays last year would have helped to have a linebacker fill the hole, but having a safety who could have taken somebody down once they came through would have been useful as well. There's a lot of value in knocking down the 30-yard pass and being able to high point the ball and keep it out of the receiver's hands there. But there's also a lot of value in keeping the run to 6 yards as opposed to allowing it to go 35. And there hasn't really been a lot of keeping runs to 8 yards in the last couple of years for this Florida defense. And I think based on the structure of the defense, they have clearly emphasized safety. They're clearly emphasizing the defensive side of the ball as well. Look, I mean, if Perkins comes in, I'm going to celebrate. But if Perkins came in and Mathews didn't, I'd look at it and go, I'm not sure they filled what they wanted to fill. If Mathews comes in, I go, okay, I see what they're doing at that safety spot. And they've targeted that safety spot. And they said, these are guys we want: Wilson, Moore, Mitchell, and Mathews. And you've basically got that set now for the next 2 or 3 years. And I think that's a huge part of shutting down offenses in 2022.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Mathews was committed at one point to Corey Raymond at LSU, correct?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, look, the minute he came to Florida, Florida started trending for Mathews. And so, again, I think it's a perception thing as well, right? Mathews has been sort of warming towards Florida this entire time. He's been trending towards Florida. Obviously, Corey Raymond and Billy Napier. I mean, Billy Napier's at Louisiana, and he knew him. I'm sure that he hadn't really thought about going to Louisiana because he had other options. But, to have him go to Brian Kelly at LSU when Brian Kelly is new there as well, that's one of those things where you look at it and go, look, this is one of those battles I think Florida needs to win. If they don't win the Perkins battle, again, I'm still disappointed. And I think fans are going to be disappointed regardless because, obviously the Kamari Wilson sort of gives you confidence that Napier is going to be able to go and flip somebody quickly. Same thing with Shamar James, right? That he can sort of spin his magic relatively quickly. Now he's had a couple of months to spin his magic on these guys. And certainly I think, quite honestly, I think the expectation of the fan base now is both of them. And that's sort of a dangerous place for Napier to be just because we've built up that expectation. And I'll tell you what, I mean, at that point, you're looking at the top 15 class. And, that's top 15 class with 17 guys. That's sort of Clemson territory. I mean, and that is a big part of it. I mean, you start looking at what you look to get out of a transition class. It's usually 1 or 2 all SEC guys. And if you've got Wilson, James, Perkins, and Mathews, my expectation is at least 3 all SEC players out of those 4, which means you'd be outperforming historically what you get out of transition classes, even for championship programs like Nick Saban, like Kirby Smart, and like Dabo Swinney.
These are the type of recruits I expected to be in the class of 2023. I thought the class of 2022 was going to be, a little Band-Aid here, see what we can do in the transfer portal. Let's see where we can get this thing. The fact that we're in on the number 4 player in the nation, the number 36 player in the nation, and we're just in the home stretch ahead, we survived the early signing day period with both of them, and we're in the home stretch here toward the February signing day, and we got a shot at this. Unbelievable job that we're even in this thing. With Mathews, though, it makes sense, committed to Raymond at LSU. So it makes sense that he'd be talking to the same coach that he originally committed to on a regular basis, and that team would have a shot. With Perkins, doing the work they've done on Perkins, that one's really impressed me. And these are the type of guys, these are the type of battles I expect to be fighting in year 2 of Billy Napier, or the class for the class of 2023. So I guess that's more over the summer before the season starts here. But I'm happy that we're even in this discussion at the moment. And once we land, I believe we'll land at least one of these two guys. If we land them both, the momentum heading into the class of 2023 is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a foundation. That's what you're setting. You're setting a foundation. And I think part of that foundation is what the 45 people that Napier's brought into the staff at this point. And one of the things I said last night on Gators Breakdown, and I think it's important to reemphasize here, is that staff, you think about Napier going and doing sort of these high school clinics. You think about him going out there and glad handling with the different high schools. You think about him going and visiting recruits. He's able to do that because he has people back home taking care of all the details. And so saving time by having somebody who's taking care of all the details and has relationships with the players, right? I mean, to the point where, I mean, in many cases, you listen to some of these players and it feels like in some capacity they're committing because of Katie Turner, not necessarily because of Billy Napier. And that's not completely true, but I think in some capacity, having that contact point that's consistent, having them tell you things and then having those things to come out to be true, and having Napier really sort of laying the foundation for what he's going to do. The recruitment of Kamari Wilson isn't just that he's a 5-star. It's that he went into IMG Academy, where all Florida coaches have struggled up until this point, and was able to build a relationship enough with those coaches to where at least they weren't actively recruiting him away from Florida, which feels like what's happened before. Now you've got Wilson here on campus. He's going to actively recruit his friends from IMG. And so building those pipelines are going to be important. Now, I do think that when you get to 2023, we need to start seeing, I want to see the 5-stars in Florida start to really filter in, right? I mean, you go after the guy you can get in Texas, you go after the guy you can get in Louisiana. But at the end of the day, this program is going to rise or fall based on keeping all the guys at Alabama and Clemson have been pulling out of the state, who've been helping Alabama and Clemson win national championships. And Napier's going to have to keep those guys at home. So there's still a lot of work to do. But the good news is that, right now they got to fly out to Texas and, visit these people. In fact, I think Dave said last night that Napier's flying out on Friday before Perkins goes on his official visit to LSU, or maybe it's Mathews before he goes on his official visit to LSU to make sure he seals the deal. And that's something that we haven't seen with the previous staff. And to be honest, partly because Mullen, because of the recruiting violations, wasn't able to do it, right? It wasn't just a matter of want to, it was a matter of being able and allowed to do it. And you think about NIL, having a director of NIL who can help players understand how they can maximize their earnings while they're here. All those little details start to build together. And you're right. I mean, you bring in a top 15 class with 2 5-stars and 2 high 4-stars as well. And especially if those guys pan out, it's going to be a big deal, and especially since it's on the side of the ball on defense where Florida struggled the last 2 years, where like if we can just kind of keep the same offensive performance that we've had in 2020 and even for some of 2021, and the defense can be more locked down, then all of a sudden this team's a lot more fun to watch.
You want to see people do well at the things they are advertised to do well in, and Billy Napier advertised as a great recruiter. It's awesome to see some results early. It's like Jim McElwain when you watch his first season, you go, this is the guy that's going to fix our offense. What happened here? I mean, Mullen, you saw the offense pick up right away. He was good at what he's good at. Like so it's good to see Napier come in and have some early success here. It gives you a lot of confidence heading in. I mean, wrapping up, we're still in on some races right now in 2022, but looking ahead to 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, look, Napier came here with an 8-point plan. The first point was foundations. And I think he's laying that when it comes to recruiting, and he's laying that when it comes to players who are already in the program, and he's laying that in terms of building relationships and building his staff and all that sort of stuff. And that's all it is a foundation, right? You got to follow through with all the other parts of your plan. Now, the good news is that the fact that, even when you think about the staff, there were some NFL options that have been floated out there in the Athletic. Those options didn't materialize. And clearly Billy had a part B, or had a plan B, and maybe even a plan C. And so the fact that the fact that those contingency plans are in place makes you then confident that he'll have contingency plans when it comes to recruiting as well, right? So you're not going to sit there and all of a sudden shift focus from one guy to another. You will have been recruiting a whole list of people hard. And if one guy at the top decides to go someplace else, fans aren't even going to notice because there's 3 or 4 guys who are sitting there on the board that you go, okay, we're going to go to the next guy where we feel like we have a stronger relationship and bring those sorts of people in. So, yeah, I mean, look, there's still an awful lot of work to do. And I'm not here saying he's accomplished anything. In fact, just having Harold Perkins on campus is significant, but it doesn't mean anything if Harold Perkins plays for Texas or LSU. And same thing with Jacoby Mathews. Like, it's great that he's trending towards Florida, but it doesn't matter if he ends up at LSU. And so, at the end of the day, you got to close the deal. I think one of the things that we learned early on with the Dan Mullen era is that he was in on a lot of guys, especially early. But closing the deal never really happened. And so, that's the deal at this point. You're a recruiter, sellers sell, you close, you have to close if you're a good recruiter. And so it's time to close, and we'll see whether Napier can get it done.
Well, hey, you put a quarterback in, you're down by 2 touchdowns heading into the fourth quarter. If he can get it done, that's pretty incredible. So let's hope he closes the deal on at least one of those 2 guys, because that'd be great to see coming into Gator Nation. 8-point plan for Billy Napier. One of the steps is called discretionary. Feels like they just ran out of space on the calendar. They didn't know what to do on that one. Billy, if you need help naming one, let us know. Yeah, let us know if you need help with that discretionary part of the 8-point plan. 6 bits. We'll move on to little portal hopping. Tyron Hopper in the portal last week, which immediately out, but now he's back again a few days later here. So last week, rising junior Tyron Hopper entered the transfer portal, but quickly changed his mind, withdrew his name, and announced he would be staying put in Gainesville. But this is the transfer portal era. Nothing is ever fully settled. And now Hopper has entered the transfer portal for a second time, probably the final time this past week here. According to Matt Zenitz of On3Sports.com, Hopper may be destined for Auburn or Missouri. Of course, Christian Robinson, the former linebacker coach, just took a job at Auburn, and Missouri. I think I read his brother is at Missouri. Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but his brother is at Mizzou, which is that's why it's drawn his interest. But he accounted for 62 total tackles, 32 solo, 2.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble this past season. Was having a solid game in the Gasparilla Bowl before he ended up getting ejected. And I guess that's the last time we'll see Tyron Hopper in the orange and blue.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing that he leaves. I think one of the things that's interesting is that, 8 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. He was a bright spot on a defense that didn't have a lot of them. But what I would also say is he was on the field when Florida was getting gashed by LSU on all those counters, and he was on the field when Florida was getting gashed against Samford, and there just wasn't any life. And so I'm disappointed that he's leaving, but I am not. We're not losing Ray Lewis, right? I mean, maybe he ends up being Ray Lewis, but he's not Ray Lewis right now. And so I look at it and say, best of luck to you. I hope you do well. It's a little bit weird jumping in and out of the portal and all that stuff that's going on, but at the end of the day, that's sort of what how this stuff works these days. I think it means that it's really important that Ventrell Miller's back. I think it's important then that it looks like Amari Burney might be coming back as well. Sort of seen him at some of these camps, and the guys like DeJuan Black and Chief Waters and Scooby Williams, the guys who have been used sparingly are going to have to step up, and that's the reality is they're going to have to step up. And certainly Shamar James, and then if you can get Harold Perkins to come, those guys are going to play early too, and it's good actually. One of the things I think that was interesting about the Mullen era is they go 10-3. And did that put pressure on the staff to not play the young guys? Because one of the things I think you have some grace early on, like if Florida goes 6-6 next year, nobody's going to look at Napier and go, "Oh, what a failure." They're going to look and say he's building something, right? And the problem with the Mullen era was you looked at the recruiting and said, "Well, he's not building something that can compete with Georgia," and so it's time to move on. But you think about Tyron Hopper. I mean, played in 6 games in 2020. 13 total tackles. He played in 2 games in 2019, 2 total tackles. And the fact that the guy had 13 total tackles and he was a redshirt freshman, so you weren't worried about blowing his redshirt year in 2020 with as bad as that defense was. says something about either one, his ability to prepare, and certainly the pandemic impacted that, or two, just the staff's absolute reliance on guys that they were comfortable with, even in a year where just a little bit of an upgrade in defense would have made a major difference. So look, I mean, I'm sorry to see him go. I think he's obviously the best guy from an experience perspective who was going to be coming back, but I don't think he's irreplaceable. So it's one of those things where you're disappointed because you don't want to have to replace someone like that. He was going to be a starter and he was going to be a good player for Florida, but was he going to be a superstar? I don't know. I think we'd seen flashes, but flashes aren't good enough in the SEC. You got to be good consistently. And, if this gives other guys an opportunity to step up, then maybe it ends up being a positive.
I think you give the kid a benefit of the doubt. It's a new coaching staff. Maybe it didn't click with them the way he clicked with the old one. You committed to that old staff. And, it used to be players didn't have much choice. They're just stuck. New coach staff comes in. Well, that's who I'm playing for now. I got to figure it out. Now your brother's over at Missouri. Your old coach is calling you up from Auburn. I could see where there's some appeal in that for some of these guys. And, if the coaches, if they're at the same level, maybe they're not too thrilled with you. Maybe they watch some of that LSU tape and some of that Stanford tape, like you're saying, and they're looking at the situation going like, yeah, dude, like we got a lot of talent coming in. You're not going to, we're starting everybody for giving their, you talked about that with Emory Jones a couple weeks ago. Napier did. Giving everybody a clean slate, starting from scratch, and maybe Hopper felt like, you know what, I can probably guarantee myself more playing time if I go to either Auburn or Missouri. At least I'm with my brother or my old coach at that point.
Yeah.
So,
well, and Jay Bateman's
anything went wrong per se, just different opportunities for the kids out there today.
Yeah, well, Jay Bateman's coming in to coach linebackers, and Bateman was at North Carolina when his brother Tyrone was there at North Carolina, has since transferred to Missouri. So, you wonder whether one of the reasons he transferred was to get away from Bateman. Florida hires Bateman, and then is that sort of what facilitates the change maybe as well? Again, I think it goes back to, when you take a job or when I take a job, you're not just doing the work, right? You're also you're also agreeing to work for the company and agreeing to work for a supervisor. And most people quit because they don't like their boss. Right. I mean, most people don't quit because the company is bad or the pay is bad. I mean, that happens sometimes. Most of the time you quit because your boss is terrible and you decide you want to go someplace else. And so in this case, Hopper has an opportunity to reestablish, basically be recruited again. Mm-hmm. And he has an opportunity to choose who he's going to interface with rather than allowing Florida to choose it for him. And so when you're that good, you have the opportunity to do that, right? Hopper's not going to get left in the transfer portal. There are other guys on the team who might not necessarily gel with Billy Napier, but can't leave because they will get stuck in the transfer portal. And there won't be a spot for them when the merry-go-round ends. And so, when you're somebody like Hopper and you've gone out on the field and you flash that talent, you were talented to begin with, you have options. And since you have those options, hey, more power to them. Exercise your options, go where you want to go. And, we'll see where the chips lay. I mean, at the end of the day, Florida isn't winning the national title in 2022. And Tyron Hopper was probably going to the NFL after next year, right? If he started, played all 12 games, played well, chances are he's going to the pros. So, from the standpoint of building a program, obviously depth is important. You want to perform and you want other people to be playing against NFL quality guys. But in terms of what Florida, and in terms of what Napier wants to be in 2023 and 2024, Tyron Hopper probably wasn't part of those plans.
Have fun playing for that dork Drinkwitz up there in Missouri. Have fun with that, Tyron. All right, let's kick it over to $1. There's an interesting conversation on a recent podcast from 1010XL in Jacksonville called Gator Bites, BYTES. The episode is from January 19th with Ryan Green and Denny Thompson. He's a quarterback coach in the Jacksonville area, discussing whether players should be able to follow coaches in the transfer portal when the coach gets a new job. Though it's applicable to other schools at the moment, the discussion was clearly motivated by the fact that Billy Napier has brought 3 Louisiana players to Gainesville. We've certainly seen some strife on Twitter over that topic. Green set up the discussion by first saying that coaches are not only bringing coaches from their previous stop these days, but players as well. And he asked Thompson if he expected that to be a trend going forward. The topic absolutely set Thompson off. He said, "I hope not, because I hate it." I think it's classless. I think when you go to a school and you recruit and you coach kids at that school, then you decide you want to go somewhere else. Lincoln Riley's at the top of my head when I'm saying this. What you did at that school, at Louisiana, at Oklahoma, you got paid for. You were there to produce for that school. He continued, just because your paycheck is different doesn't mean that you go back and by default hurt that school that fulfilled their role. They paid you. Every time that you were there, your paycheck was in an account every time. Will, he also made a few other points after his initial statement, after a bit of discussion, his general points where there needs to be a rule that says you can't follow your coach in the transfer portal. Thompson's absolutely in favor of the transfer portal. He's totally fine with, Kimber from Georgia coming down to Florida now, but different issue with coaches following players. He thinks that sets a bad precedent, allowing that. He thinks colleges will just flat out start buying top ranked recruiting classes, classes that were assembled at other schools. You hire a guy like Riley, you can pull a lot of those Oklahoma kids over to USC. We've certainly seen that in that instance. Players going to follow. He called players following coaches immoral, and he feels that Napier should not pluck any players from Louisiana Lafayette. He referred to that as tacky, and he also said that if Caleb Williams ends up at USC with Lincoln Riley, that it would be a bad look. And he ended things saying that he's so tired of hearing coaches talk about morality to kids, and then they go around and betray someone with how in leaving for the next job. So I thought it was a strong statement all around by Thompson. Definitely strong opinion. I'm not sure I totally agree with him on that. I get the frustration though, because allowing players to follow a coach to a different school, seeing like a freshman sensation like Oklahoma had this year with Caleb Williams, and then to see him leave after the first year he's on campus and he has a great season, and he's using that to really get ahead in the NIL era. He's taking full advantage of the market. You can't blame the kid, but that's a totally different thing for college football these days. And I know for some people it's a huge turnoff. I think it's just a new reality in the sport. And this take here, you're in favor of the transfer portal, but not in certain instances. So you're limiting the kid's decision to go. Like, what if those kids care more about playing for the coach than they do the school? Does that matter? Does that matter if the kids want to go follow Napier? I see the issue with it on the one hand, but I can also defend it on the other. And I don't think it's as black and white as Thompson made it out to be here.
I mean, I see no issue with it whatsoever. I think the idea that you were paid to do a job at a certain place is true, except that you were paid to the terms of your contract. Because if Billy Napier was violating the terms of his contract at Louisiana, then Louisiana would be suing him. And if Lincoln Riley was violating the terms of his contract with Oklahoma by going to USC and poaching players, then Oklahoma would be suing him. So this is a contract problem. If you don't, you work in any other industry, there's a non-compete clause in those places, and you can't go someplace else and do the exact same job and go poach people from your previous employer. Like, that's built into the non-compete that's typically signed when you go work there. And why do you sign the non-compete if you're just a rank and file guy who goes, or girl who works for a place like that? Because they have the leverage. And so what's happened here is in college football, coaches have the leverage. And how do we know that? Because they're getting paid $10 million a year. That's how we know that, right? And so if you wanted to pay Billy Napier $13 million a year at Louisiana and have him sign a non-compete, you could probably do that. But the reality is that the Jimmy Sextons of the world are not going to allow that to be put into their contract. Well, that's on you. Like, you've set up the system. You get to decide what contract you give or don't give. You get to decide what the buyout is, and you get to decide how you reward your players financially. And I'll be honest, it's interesting. I wrote something a couple of weeks ago about sort of the idea that there's just a lack of trust between institutions and players, which is what drives this, right? That players have to necessarily be out for their own best interests because the universities have not shown that they will do that without being nudged by the Supreme Court. And that these guys, we know they've been, you want to talk about immoral. How about guys who've been out there sacrificing their bodies for years who now, guys who are like disabled from having played football and pushed through pain and taken Toradol shots and gotten hits to the head and all that sort of stuff. Again, I think you got a scholarship. You agreed to do it as a player, but I don't know. I look at it and how big is Denny Thompson's lawn? Because he's shouting at a lot of people to get off of it at this point. It's the reality. And look,
but hey, instead of just automatically putting down like saying calling it an old man take, which to some extent I get what you're saying. There is a segment of the college football fan base that is worried about this, that is looking at it and say, well, this isn't the college football that I grew up with or that I recognize anymore. And the reason they love college football is because you don't deal with, guys like Antonio Brown. You're not dealing with the garbage situations that you deal with in pro sport. I mean, what MLB, they're on the verge. Are they on the verge of starting? They're supposed to be starting pitchers and catchers, and do they still have all the pictures of the players pulled down from the website right now? So there's a lot of garbage in pro sports that you don't associate with college sports. However, it's tricky when you talk about, it's like you said, immoral in college sports, the business of college sports. I don't know if I'd go around throwing the word morality or
Yeah, and the problem I have with all of this is that he's blaming the coaches and the players when the people who are negotiating the contracts that bring in the revenue are at the conference and the NCAA level, right? So the one and done rule is facilitated by the NBA, but at the end of the day has really harmed college basketball as a product. And college basketball hasn't cared. The NCAA hasn't cared. They get the money from their tournament, but I can't watch that stuff anymore because at the end of the day, I don't get an opportunity to understand the players. And like one of the things about those Florida teams with Noah and Horford and Brewer and Humphreys is that you got to sort of grow with those guys as they went through those championship runs.
And you also don't get the opponents too. Ronaldo Balkman being their Achilles heel for whatever reason drove you crazy, right? Up at South Carolina.
So my point though is that the solution isn't to say, well, okay, or the solution didn't need to be, all right, well, we'll let Kentucky go sign every 5-star guy out there who's only going to be there for a year. And hey, Anthony Davis will win the national title because he's that good the first year he's there. Might the solution have been, let's figure out a way to share revenue with these guys so that they're incentivized to stay in school as opposed to go to college or go to the NBA? Mm-hmm. And can you do the same thing at the college level? Can you incentivize people, say, hey, you're free to transfer, but there's a monetary incentive for you to stay? And so I just look at it and I go, instead of railing at the coaches and railing at the players, and quite honestly, we all know, I mean, when Urban Meyer was at Florida, the recruits flooded in. When Will Muschamp was at Florida and when Jim McElwain was at Florida, the recruits didn't flood in quite the same way. The minute Urban Meyer goes up to Ohio State, the recruits flood in, right? Like they are absolutely committing to a coach. And so to think that when that coach leaves that they won't look, I think is naive. Now, can you set up a incentive structure to where players don't want to leave? Absolutely you could, but that would actually require somebody who's holding on to the money like Grim Death to say, you know what, we're going to share this with the people and incentivize the people who are actually the entertainment to help them stay. Otherwise, in my mind, you don't get to complain. It's the same thing as the schools. Like Oklahoma feels jilted by Lincoln Riley going to USC. That's fine, but you didn't have anything in the contract to prevent him from doing that. And if you're worried about, well, we couldn't put that in the contract because he's got too much leverage. Again, if you give him enough money, you can build in the leverage. And so there's a way to build that leverage in if you put the appropriate incentives in. Same thing with guys in the transfer portal. If you put the appropriate incentives in, you can get guys to stay. But that's going to require actually spending money on the players, or that's going to require universities spending money in order to gain the leverage for non-competes in their contracts. And look, I mean, we go through this all the time. Everything in life is a negotiation. And so the only leverage the players have is going someplace else. And there's no monetary benefit for somebody to stay at, say, Billy Napier comes in, Tyron Hopper doesn't like his situation. He says, look, I'm going to go transfer to Missouri. The only difference is that if you're a legend at Florida, people will remember you. And if you're a legend at Missouri, no one will know what your name is 30 seconds after you leave. But at the end of the day, is the financial incentive today any different? Not really. It's still SEC football. You're still going to get seen by the pros. You might even get more exposure because you know you're going to start consistently. Like there are all sorts. The incentives are set up for you to go to a place that fits you perfectly, as opposed to a place where maybe you're incentivized to stay. So I mean, to me, that would be the solution. The solution isn't to rail against immorality or set a rule that restricts people's ability. Like, why does it have to be the stick? Can we bring a carrot to the table and try to convince people they should stay rather than trying to beat them into staying, which has always been the NCAA's way, or at least conference's ways. Let's beat the players down until they surrender, as opposed to, hey, let's share some of the value that we've brought in with these guys to incentivize them to do the things that we want them to do.
Yeah, the traditionalist in me understands the frustration echoed by Thompson of a lot of college football fans, I'm sure. But you know, the reality is, in a lot of instances, when coaches have left in the past, one of the arguments was, "Hey, how come the coach can leave but the player can't?" And it's cool that guys are getting their opportunity to be able to make their own decisions now, even though I don't know if that's better for the sport necessarily. It's better for the players, better for the coaches, maybe better for the sport. Because it's like you said, the college basketball comparison's a good one, because I can maybe name one Gator basketball player. And I'm very casual. I'm not a big time basketball fan. I watch it casually. I was in school when Noah and Horford and all those guys were there, and that was a lot of fun to watch. I watched almost all their games, but I just, part of the reason why I don't get into college basketball as much is you don't get time to know the guys. They're there for a year or two. It's a transfer from Virginia Tech in 1 year, and it's a transfer from Michigan another year. And, you know, just guys wearing the uniform. It's not really deep connection to the school. And I do worry about that to some extent, but I don't think that's going to be the story for the majority of college football. And I think the problem with this argument that Thompson is making is that you're talking about, at the end of the day, what percentage of players are you talking about, Will? We're talking about a very small percentage of players that are actually going to be making this move in this career with any real impact. Most guys are going to transfer into oblivion. So some school, you're never going to watch them play again. Some guys are just going to go somewhere and, you know, with high hopes and not quite pan out. But there's not, the Joe Burrow transfer stories of the world are few and far between. So Caleb Williams is an interesting story, the Oklahoma quarterback, because he's probably going to have a big impact. That could be a potential Joe Burrow type situation. But again, we're talking about one kid. We're not talking about the whole market here. So yeah, I think it's a small percentage of players, and it's not something to get totally worked up about if you're not loving this trend in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bad for college football overall. I think the portal, in terms of the fan experience, is a negative thing, right? Just like I think the one and done in college is a good thing for the players, but it is a bad thing for college basketball overall. And I would say the same thing happened to Major League Baseball when they decided they were going to start every playoff game at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. That was good from a financial perspective for Major League Baseball to start with. And it's terrible now, 20 years later, when people like my kid who play the sport haven't ever seen a playoff game or a World Series game because they're in bed before it even starts. And so there are short-term gains that each sport has to weigh with the long-term benefits. And you can't expect coaches who have limited timelines, right? I mean, look, Dan Mullen had an extended period of time at Mississippi State, but most coaches get 3-4 years and then they're out and they're a coordinator, and they're always living on that day-to-day timeline. And if somebody comes and says, hey, I'll let you reset that timeline for another 3 or 4 years, well, you just made another $40 million. That's life-changing money. And I can't blame somebody for doing that. Same thing, a player at a program, he's got 3 or 4 years to make his mark. He's not looking 10, 15, 20 years at the health of the sport. So the problem that you have is that the people that you're blaming are all people who have 3 or 4 year windows. They're incentivized to think short term, which means they're going to try to maximize the value that they get in the short term. It's the job of the conference commissioners and the NCAA and Mark Emmert and the lawyers who are involved in all this stuff to think about the long-term health of the sport. And the fact that they just sort of drag their feet until the Supreme Court tells them that they need to make a change is why this turns out the way it turns out. No one can agree to an actual structure that is good for the long-term health of the sport, which is how you end up with like split national championships where you got an elite team and a crappy Pac-12 team playing in the Rose Bowl, and Nebraska playing the number 9 ranked team in the Orange Bowl 25 years ago, and and how you end up with with the playoff where it's always the SEC facing off each other at the end. Like, one of the reasons those things happen is because there's no sort of guiding voice at the top. So I'm nominating, if they're looking for a college football commissioner, I'm happy to do that. But to me, that's the problem, right? Is that we're asking for long-term health decisions, and the morality aspect of it is somebody looking at it saying, I think this is bad for the long-term health of the sport. But the reality is Lincoln Riley doesn't give a crap about what college football is 20 years from now. His incentive structure doesn't fit in that. Bobby Bowden cared about what was going to happen 20 years from now, because his incentive structure was to be one of those long-term, going to be there forever, all that sort of stuff. But even those guys, right? I mean, you look, there was a lot of grumbling about Joe Paterno even before the Sandusky stuff, that things had started to degrade there at Penn State. The same thing happened with Bobby Bowden. He wasn't necessarily pleased to be leaving. Think about like the Frank Beamers of the world. Even Steve Spurrier at Florida, the pressure got ramped up to a point where he decided to try something different. The reality is that the pressure's ramped up, the money's ramped up, and so the incentive structure to be long-term focused for these coaches isn't there anymore. So you've got two entities that are focused on short-term benefits, and there needs to be somebody else who looks long-term. You can't just sit there and rail at the coaches. And maybe the long-term agreement is that the universities need to come together and say, we're going to put non-competes in these coaches' contracts, and we're just not going to budge on that. And that's going to be part of it. Now, there might be some antitrust law stuff in there that happens if you do that.
Like attracting a top coach to that job too.
Well, but my point is that, look, I mean, if I had the option between two, so I do research and development with different chemistries, and I run a department. And so if my company has a non-compete and I'm looking and there's somebody out there who doesn't, then that's a negotiating point, right? The fact that they don't means that job has more value, because if somebody else comes along and offers me twice the salary, I can leave. Now, in that space, they can do that. Now, they don't, because there's enough of me around that's why I'm not making $8 million a year, right? It's that there are enough of people with my skills that they can go find somebody else, and they'll tell me to go jump if I say I don't want to non-compete. Same thing has to happen in college football. I think at the end of the day, they are not violating contracts. And to me, doing something immoral means you're violating your contract. So if you want to talk about morality, it really comes down to the administrators who are putting contracts in front of these coaches who allow this to happen.
Yeah, and the other way you look at it is like those 3 kids coming over from Louisiana, do they have a better opportunity to further their careers playing at the University of Florida on a bigger stage in front of I mean, it could be that those 3 kids, they want that opportunity too. That's not just Billy going in and raiding poor old Louisiana.
Short-term decision, right? I mean,
clearly in on it too. But the other thing too is it's on all sides too. The schools are guilty too. How many coaches get 5 to 10 years to develop a program anymore? I mean, like, maybe Vanderbilt's the only one we're going to see that does that, where they look like they're on an 8 to 10 year rebuild right now with Clark Lee and some of the experimental recruiting stuff going on up there right now. But other than that, you're not going to see that across the big boys in college football. And I'll tell you what, sometimes it's going to work your way in your favor, and sometimes it's going to work against you. And that's something that we've already seen that on our side this season, where we've had a couple good transfers in. We've lost a couple strong players too. So that's the way it's going to be in college sports right now. College football is going through a reckoning that's been long overdue. They've been putting off all these issues for a very long time in college sports. These have been talked about, Will, the entirety of our lives since we were kids. We're in our mid 30s, early 40s right now here, and they're finally getting around to dealing with these issues. It's the Wild West right now. I do think I don't know if there's going to be a lot of hard and fast rules about restricting movement, but I do think that the system is going to go through some rapid change over the next few years before the dust finally settles and we get a little more stability again in college sports.
Yeah, I just say don't restrict, incentivize coaches to stay. But part of that is that punish yourself when you make a bad hire and you got to fire somebody. Right. So
you get punished by paying out Texas paying $50 million to its staff to move on and get a new one. Auburn's the same thing.
But Florida removed Dan Mullen for $12 million, and his contract had a lot more than $12 million left on it. So, look, the university put a buyout in there, and Mullen agreed to that. What if they said, we'll pay you the full value of your contract, but we'd like to put a 1-year non-compete in there? Right at that point, both entities have skin in the game. Florida has skin in the game to not let Mullen go and give him every opportunity to succeed, but Mullen has incentive to continue working and working as hard as he can, because he's going to have to take a year off. Now, maybe it needs to be more than a year, because a lot of times these coaches take a year off and then reemerge someplace else. But that year off would mean that anybody you've recruited to the university is going to have to wait for you to reemerge someplace else to transfer. And I think that sort of calms down some of the waves that you're getting and some of the unhappiness that you're getting with this. I think there are ways to do this in contracts. There's enough money out there that you can get creative, and with Nick Saban, look, he's going to get what he wants. At the end of the day, that's pretty clear. But a guy like Napier, who's a high profile guy, but hasn't necessarily proven himself at a Power 5 place yet, would you have had the opportunity to give him more money on the front end, more money on the back end, but put something in there about a non-compete? Maybe. And, the other thing is Louisiana got exactly what they wanted. They raised the profile of that football program and that school significantly under Billy Napier. They got exactly what they paid for, and they knew. And that's why they were so happy about him leaving when he left, right? They knew that he was going to move on at some point. I think they're sitting there going, well, we would have liked him not to take everybody with him. Put it in the contract. I mean, at the end of the day,
a lot of the coaches are still there. They still got a lot of coaches in place for him. They got the system from him. They got a lot of the players he brought in still. We're talking about a few guys that left Louisiana.
All I know is we didn't steal their picture of the swamp. That's all I know.
I'm not even getting into that. That's our show for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining another episode of Stand Up and Holler. Please be sure to continue to follow our work on readandreaction.com. And again, putting the articles up for those of you that prefer the audio format on the YouTube channel for now. We are hearing the voices out there talking about expanding into different podcast forums. We're just keeping it simple on YouTube for now, but we hear you guys. We're looking into that. No promises on any timelines, but we're just taking it easy, taking it slow on that right now, and just having a look. But Will, any final words before we head out?
I would just say, we're also hearing everybody talking about the commercials. The reality is that's one of the things that we do to keep this going. If you don't like the commercials, $2 a month, you can head over to our Patreon page, and we put all of these episodes up commercial free, as well as the bonus episodes that are over there as well. You can get all the bonus episodes the minute you sign up over there for $2 a month. And then tonight's bonus episode will be up there in a couple of days, NFL versus college overtime. So head over there, patreon.com/readandreaction. We really, really, really appreciate everybody's support. But certainly we're trying to give you what you're asking for, but at the same time, helping to pay the bills over here a little bit as well.
Hey, if you're interested in listening to Will cry a little more about the Buffalo Bills, strongly suggest checking out the bonus episode tonight over on our Patreon page after this. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us on Stand Up and Holler. Have a great week, and go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.